A quiet alert just hit the wire that changes everything for your wealth. On Wednesday, December 17th, 2025, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission issued an emergency notice that 99% of the public missed. Buried under the regulatory jargon of the Sunshine Act, the headline should have stopped the world. An emergency closed-door commission meeting is scheduled for Monday morning. The official topic? Market stabilization measures for the precious metals complex. In the language of the financial elite, that is code for one thing. We are about to change the rules of the game to save the banks that are too big to fail. As a macro historian, I have seen this exact blueprint executed before. It happened in 1980 when the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market. The regulators did not stop the banks from manipulation. Instead, they changed the law mid-game to institute liquidation-only trading. They made it illegal to buy. You could only sell. History does not repeat, but it rhymes with a terrifying precision. Today, the physical silver vaults from London to New York are hemorrhaging metal at a rate the math can no longer hide. The system is broken, and the elite are preparing to slam the door shut on retail investors. You now have exactly 48 hours before the paper market and the physical reality collide. By Monday afternoon, the silver you thought you could buy at any price might be legally out of reach. This is not just a meeting, it is a sentencing for the current monetary era. To understand the 48-hour window we are in today, we must exhume the corpse of 1980. The story of Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt is often told by the mainstream media as a tale of greed, but for those who study elite patterns, it was a masterclass in regulatory execution. By the late 1970s, inflation was ravaging the American dollar. The Hunt brothers did what any rational investor would do. They moved their wealth into the hardest asset they could find, physical silver. By January of 1980, silver had climbed from $2 to an all-time high of $50 per ounce. The Hunt brothers held nearly 200 million ounces. They weren't just winning, they were about to break the system. If they stood for delivery on their contracts, the New York and Chicago vaults would have been empty. The paper lie would have been exposed. This is when the elite invoked the nuclear option. On January 21st, 1980, the commodity exchanges, under the guidance of the regulators, changed the rules mid-game. They implemented Silver Rule Number 7. It was called liquidation-only trading. This is a mechanism of pure market asymmetry. It meant that while the Hunt brothers and retail investors could sell their positions to drive the price down, no one, absolutely no one, was allowed to open a new long position to buy. The result was a mathematical certainty. Without buyers, the price of silver collapsed from $50 to $10 in a matter of weeks. The Hunt brothers were liquidated, losing billions, while the large bullion banks that were short on silver were bailed out by the very rules they helped write. This wasn't a market correction. It was a controlled demolition. When you hear that the commission is meeting this Monday, you are hearing the echo of 1980. The liquidation-only trap is the ultimate weapon of the establishment. It is how they reset the board when the peasants start winning. In the world of macro finance, narratives can be manipulated, but the math is a cold, indifferent witness. As of Wednesday, December 17th, 2025, the arithmetic of exhaustion has reached its terminal phase. To understand why the Commission is panicking, you must look at the leverage ratio within the COMEX. Currently, the ratio of paper silver contracts to physical ounces registered for delivery has exploded to over 400 to 1. This means for every single ounce of physical metal available for delivery, 400 separate entities believe they own it. This is the classic elite architecture of rehypothecation. They sell you the same house 400 times, collect the fees, and pray you never ask for the keys. But the registered silver vaults, the metal specifically designated for market settlement, have been hemorrhaging at a rate of millions of ounces per month. The math no longer pencils out. The Sunshine Act notice for the emergency meeting this Monday morning is not a routine checkup. It is a code blue for the fractional reserve silver system. The establishment is facing a mathematical certainty of default. When the registered inventory drops below a critical threshold, the system faces what we call a delivery failure. If even 5% of those paper contract holders demand their physical metal this Monday, the exchange collapses. The elite know this. They are not meeting to fix the shortage, they are meeting to prevent you from exposing it. By banning new buy orders, they freeze the demand side of the equation while allowing their banking partners to wash their concentrated short positions in a vacuum. They are using your lack of mathematical awareness as a shield. They assume you will watch the ticker price and ignore the vault data. But remember, in this empire of debt, the price is a lie and the vault is the only truth. The 400 to 1 leverage is a ticking time bomb and the timer is about to hit zero. When the Commodity Futures Trading Commission uses the phrase market stabilization, you must understand the translation in the halls of power. It does not mean protecting your savings or ensuring a fair price. It means protecting the concentrated short positions of the massive bullion banks. For decades, a handful of elite institutions, the names you know, like JP Morgan and other primary dealers, have suppressed the price of silver by selling billions of ounces of paper contracts that do not exist in the physical world. They have created a mountain of debt that the current supply of silver can never repay. If the price of silver were allowed to reach its true mathematical equilibrium based on the scarcity we discussed in Part 3, these banks would face a systemic wipeout. Their losses would be measured in the hundreds of billions, triggering a domino effect that would shatter the entire financial architecture of Wall Street. This is why the rules change. The emergency meeting on Monday is a desperate act of institutional cannibalism. The regulators are stepping in to sacrifice the retail investor, the person holding a few silver bars or a silver exchange-traded fund, to provide liquidity for the giants. This is the ultimate double standard of the elite playbook. When a private citizen like you makes a bad trade, you are liquidated and lose everything. But when the big banks make a catastrophic multi-billion-dollar bet against reality, the regulators simply pause the game, turn off the buy button, and allow the banks to settle their paper obligations at artificial, suppressed prices. They are not stabilizing a market, they are managing a crime scene. They are ensuring that the profit flows upward while the losses are socialized among the masses. By the time the markets reopen, the banks will have covered their tracks, and you will be left standing outside a locked vault. You are not a customer in this system, you are the collateral. The illusion of Western control is rapidly evaporating, while regulators in Washington, D.C. scramble to stabilize a failing paper system. This Monday, the center of gravity for the global silver market is shifting 10,000 miles to the east. For over a century, the price of silver was dictated by the London Fix and the New York COMEX. But in 2025, we are witnessing the Great Eastern Pivot. The Shanghai Gold Exchange has begun to decouple from the Western paper price. For months, we have seen a massive premium on silver in Shanghai, sometimes as high as 10 to 15% above the New York spot price. In the world of elite patterns, this is a massive red flag. Arbitrage is a powerful force. Physical metal is being vacuumed out of Western vaults and shipped to Asia, where it is valued for its true industrial and monetary worth. The Chinese and Indian central banks, along with their private citizens, have learned the lesson of 1980. They no longer trust the paper promises of the COMEX. They want the physical bar in their hand. While the CFTC prepares to shut the door on American retail buyers, the East is opening the gates. This is more than a price discrepancy. It is a geopolitical transition of power. When New York loses the ability to set the price of silver because they have no physical metal left to deliver, the dollar's status as the ultimate reserve begins its final descent. The elite in the West are trying to manage a shortage that they can no longer control because the metal is already gone. It is in Shanghai. It is in Singapore. It is anywhere but here. The 48-hour window you see today is the last gasp of a dying monopoly. The greatest trick the financial elite ever pulled was convincing the American public that a digital ticker symbol is the same thing as a physical asset. Most investors today believe that by holding shares in silver exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, they are protected against the coming collapse. This is a lethal misunderstanding of the system's architecture. As we approach the deadline following Wednesday, December 17th, 2025, you must realize that you do not own silver. You own a liability issued by a custodian bank. Read the fine print of these massive funds. They are designed with a cash settlement clause. In the event of a systemic force majeure, exactly like the one being discussed in the closed-door commission meeting this Monday, the fund is not required to give you physical metal. Instead, they can simply cut you a check in paper dollars at a price they determine. If silver is trading for $50 on the paper market but is selling for $300 in the physical world, they will pay you the $50 and keep the metal for themselves. This is the paper-silver bonfire. The elite created these digital proxies to siphon investment demand away from the limited physical supply. They needed a pressure relief valve for the price, but when the math of shortage becomes undeniable, they will simply blow up the valve. Your digital wealth will be incinerated in a sea of devaluing currency, while the physical bars remain locked behind the vaults of the elite. In a reset, the gap between exposure to the price and possession of the asset becomes infinite. If you cannot touch it, you do not own it. By Monday afternoon, those holding paper certificates may find themselves holding nothing but ashes. As the 48-hour window closes, we transition from the mathematical failure of the system to the only logical solution for your survival. In a monetary regime built on the shifting sands of debt, physical silver is the tangible lifeboat. The elite understand a truth that they work hard to hide from you. Every paper asset, every digital balance, and every government promise is a liability of someone else. If that counterparty fails, your wealth evaporates. Physical silver, however, is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability. It carries no counterparty risk. When the Commission implements their liquidation-only rules this Monday, the paper price may crash, but the cost of an actual 1-ounce silver coin in the real world will decouple and soar. We are entering a period of dual reality. One price for the digital screens to keep the masses calm, and another price for the physical metal to keep the elite wealthy. This is why you must ignore the volatility on the charts and focus on the weight in your hand. Throughout 300 years of economic history, during every currency reset, the elite have moved into hard assets while leaving the public holding devalued paper. Owning physical silver outside of the banking system is the ultimate act of financial rebellion. It is the only way to opt out of the surveillance and confiscation mechanisms being built into the new digital currency era. They cannot delete your silver with a keystroke. They cannot freeze your bars in a safe. As we count down the final hours before the CFTC meeting, remember, wealth is not what you see on a bank statement. Wealth is what you can carry, what you can trade, and what you can defend. Position yourself in the physical world now, because the digital world is about to be reset. To navigate the storm, you must stop looking at the waves and start looking at the lighthouse. The emergency CFTC meeting is not a shield for the public. It is a firewall for the masters of the chessboard. While you are told that liquidation-only rules are for market stability, the true beneficiaries are the primary dealers and the bullion banks, the modern descendants of the Morgan and Rockefeller financial dynasties. For years, these institutions have maintained a massive, concentrated short position on silver to keep the price suppressed and the US dollar appearing strong. But as physical silver vanishes into eastern vaults, these banks are facing a short squeeze of biblical proportions. If the price were to double overnight, these institutions would collapse, taking the entire Federal Reserve System with them. Therefore, the ban on buying is their emergency exit. By turning off the buy button, they force the price down in a vacuum, allowing themselves to close out their losing bets at your expense. This is the vampire squid model of finance. Profit is privatized for the elite, while the risk is socialized among the masses. While you are locked out of the market, the large funds use their high-frequency algorithms to wash the market, settling paper obligations for pennies on the dollar compared to the true physical value. They are not just winning the game, they are rewriting the rule book while the clock is running. This is why the system never changes, because for the top 1% of the 1%, the system is working exactly as it was designed. They are moving their wealth into physical assets today, while telling you to remain calm and trust the digital screens. The question most people ask is, why now? Why can they not simply keep the manipulative game going for another decade? The answer lies in the inescapable cycle of debt that has claimed every superpower from ancient Rome to the British Empire. We have reached the terminal point in the cycle where the interest on the national debt exceeds the entire nation's ability to produce value. This is the mathematical event horizon. The emergency CFTC meeting on Monday morning is not a choice. It is a forced response to a financial system that has finally run out of runway. When a monetary regime reaches this stage of decay, the elite have only three historical options: total hyperinflation, outright default, or controlled systemic reset. By banning the purchase of silver, the world's oldest and most reliable form of wealth, they are signaling the start of that controlled reset. They are attempting to corral the masses into a new digital currency prison while they, quietly secure the remaining physical wealth for themselves. This is an elite pattern that is repeated for over 2,000 years. Whenever the official currency becomes a complete fiction, the gatekeepers must restrict your access to the truth. The feedback loop of debt is now moving faster than the regulators can print or manipulate. Every $1 billion created to bail out a failing bank further erodes the foundation of the American dollar. The elite are trapped in a room with no exits, and the mathematical walls are closing in. You cannot solve a debt problem with more debt, and you cannot fix a shortage of physical reality with more paper lies. The collapse is no longer a remote possibility. It is a scientific certainty. This 48-hour window is the final countdown before the music stops, and the public realizes there are no chairs left in the room. The system cannot be saved because it was designed to reach this very end. The time for theory has officially ended. As the clock ticks down on this 48-hour window, your survival depends on moving from the digital abstract to the physical concrete. This is the fortress strategy. Step 1. Audit your exposure immediately. If your silver is represented by a ticker symbol like SLV or any bank-issued certificate, realize that by Monday afternoon, that asset could be functionally frozen or settled in devaluing paper dollars. Sell the digital promise and secure the physical reality. Whether it is 1-ounce sovereigns, silver eagles, or 10-ounce bars, remember that possession is 10/10ths of the law during a systemic reset. Step 2. Acquire junk silver. Pre-1964 American quarters and dimes are not just collectibles, they are the ultimate small-unit barter currency for a post-collapse economy. When the digital grid flickers, these coins carry a recognized utility that no bank account can match. Step 3. Secure your perimeter. Do not rely on bank safety deposit boxes. In 1933, when Roosevelt confiscated gold, the banks were the first place they looked. Use private, non-bank storage or high-security home solutions. Finally, shift your mindset. Do not view the coming volatility as a disaster to be feared, but as a massive transfer of power to be navigated. The elite have used these cycles for centuries to consolidate wealth. By holding physical metal, you are opting out of their rigged game. As we enter the turbulence of 2026, remember, the math never lies, the vaults are emptying, and the weight of silver in your hand is the only truth that remains. Stay vigilant, stay physical, and protect your legacy.